Gilburd. I am an assistant professor of history here at the University of Chicago, and I teach classes on the Soviet Union and modern Europe in the 19th and 20th century. And maybe you want to say a few words?
I'm Misha. I have a book, and that's why I'm here, and look forward to this conversation.
Great. So thank you very much for coming. And I guess the first kind of cluster of questions I had after looking through the book and then reading the texts, and I should confess that I looked and kind of read the photographs first, and then read the text. So the questions that I had is about the relationship between the texts, Masha's texts and your pictures, and sort of what came first, and how you, I mean, did she write the text and then they shaped your pictures, or did your picture, did your images shape the text? Because I almost read, I mean, the pictures follow every chapter, and I almost read the pictures first and got their story, and then it influenced the way I read her text.
Well, the answer is neither. We traveled together. We had a plan from the very beginning to be co-authors, and my job was not to illustrate her text, nor was her text going to basically caption my photographs. We got an idea to put our minds together and essentially travel together and co-create, but almost like together, but like separate, but equal but separate, or separate but equal, and essentially inspire each other. And that was the plan that we had. The idea for the book came when we both had an affiliation with University of Michigan. I had a show there, and Masha was there to receive the Raoul Wallenberg Award, and we just, through conversation, just came up with an idea that if we put our minds together, we could find Wallenberg. Not in a literal sense, because he'd be over 100 years old, and better people have tried than us.
And that's the first story.
Right, that's how it came about. But essentially, that if it was just a thought that we, like if the skills that I have and if the skills that I and Masha have, maybe we could perhaps add meaning to this story and attempt to do something that hasn't been done in the way that we've tried to tackle this.
One of the things that I thought, there's several things that I found so striking about the pictures, and I wanted to get your comment on that. One of which is how fragmentary the sites, the Gulag sites were, and almost how anonymous they were. Or quite a number of pictures look like they could happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Right.
I mean, other than the guard, several pictures have the guard tower and the barbed wire, but quite a number of them are natural scenes, and quite a number of them are urban scenes, and you can put almost any name under.
Well, that was one of the challenges, was finding the right distance and finding the right distance for a photographer. For me, in a sense, these places were designed to leave nothing behind, to leave no traces of individuality, of individuals who were there. Camps often moved. They were often set up in places because there was, because of timber production or uranium or some like coal or whatever, precious metals and whatever. When that ran out, camp just moved or changed its name, or camps, and they were not designed kind of to leave a mark. So it was part of my kind of almost dance as a journalist, as a photographer, was finding the right distance and to look for these for personal in those places. At the same time, when working with the archive, we're working with mugshots, when working with very personal, horrible individual stories, it was part of this dance was keeping the right distance, and maybe at times taking a few steps back, and because otherwise then this book would become a book about these one or two stories, and it would not be about what we're trying to do. So it just continues kind of like in dancing, where you look for the right distance and look for the right balance, where you try to understand, but then take steps back when you feel like you're getting too close. At the same time, when you're in these vast empty places, as you try to get closer and you look for these signs of life and signs of there's more here than barbed wire.
Did you have that feeling of getting too close?
Well, there was
in certain places.
Well, of course.
What happened?
Because we not only went to some of the camps, we met some of the survivors, and we, Masha's work is largely based on, interviews, which I had, which I listened to, and I was kind of drawn and inspired by, and the understanding that we'd have that I'm not there to photograph the people we're interviewing unless it was absolutely necessary for the book. I think there's one exception.
Right.
And it was at these places, during these interviews, that I felt it was my job to really trying to understand and trying to really get inspired by what I was hearing, but not factually photographing these stories, because it would not work where if Masha had let's say had a couple of paragraphs describing in details something that she picked up in an interview, and then there would be a photograph of it, just kind of ruining the atmosphere that she kind of built through her craft. My job is something else. I'm not.
And that sort of, I think, answers one of the questions I had. The other striking thing about the pictures is how people-less they are, and there is that one kind of interior scene was an old lady, but it was striking compared to both the stories that are so human and have names and dates attached to them, and also your other work, your work in Ukraine, your work in South Africa, which there, and I took a look at a number of pictures of yours, and there the portraiture is so important, and it's interesting that here you made that choice that portraits aren't.
Right. I mean, and this has to do with the way we as humans read images, and if we see a human face in an image or painting, our brains are wired, or for most people, their brains are wired that this image becomes about that person, and everything else is secondary. No matter what else is happening in the shot, it's about that human, in the image. So and that has the danger of kind of distracting the viewer from maybe some of the other meanings that you're trying to, messages that you're trying to send or you work on. So it was very much kind of a conscious decision to make this about kind of almost like these political landscapes. It shouldn't have too many people, or it shouldn't. This is not photojournalism, and because in many ways I am trying to photograph things that happened 60, 70, 80 years ago, and focusing too much on humans there now would kind of it would shift focus in the direction that was not right for this study.
What kind of meaning did you want to convey? Not having people and having these sort of empty landscapes, very generic, very universal. I mean, is that what you were going after?
Well, what I had very early on was the title. What we had early on was these early conversations with the historians who work at the Memorial Society, and what was important to me was getting the title from Masha, not the subtitle, because that comes from the publisher, that comes later, but Never Remember was something that I felt that my job was to photograph Never Remember, and like if you have answers for what you're about to do before you do it, you're probably not asking very good questions. And I felt like more of an explorer, and my job would be to try to look for memory and look for never remember, and I failed most of the time. A few times maybe I have succeeded.
And what do you mean by saying that you failed? Sort of
Well,
what was the failure in
I don't know.
in
like
finding
it's.
forgetfulness? Or?
I mean, I think with attempts, because I see this book as an attempt. I don't see this as a we've solved Russia, we've solved Stalin, or we've solved memory. It's an attempt, and there are days that I wake up where I feel like maybe we've accomplished some things, and there are days when I feel like maybe we didn't, and such things tend to sometimes grow, and sometimes you feel like maybe you didn't accomplish much, and I kind of want not enough time has passed for me. To kind of and to have answers to these questions. All I want to think of this as an attempt, and I have contributed. I was able to contribute kind of to this attempt, with Masha.
No, one of the key.
Yeah, we should. I'm just looking at 6:05. Yeah.
One more question.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So still on the pictures and on this sort of
Yeah.
quest for remembering, the texts actually chronicle the not forgetfulness, the memory, or the pursuit of it. In various stories and people who are going after, kind of digging up documents and trying to remember, trying to figure out what happened, and I see how the emptiness and the kind of the universality of the pictures speaks to the topic of forgetfulness. But one of the images, or several images, are about sculptures. Have sculptures there, and I was wondering if you could speak to that, because Masha specifically, and I know that that these are two independent projects and they don't illustrate each other, but she specifically has a passage that sculptures is not the way to, monuments is not the way to remember, and I just wanted to get your opinion on the function of sculptures in your project.
Good, very good last question. I mean, what I felt a lot was cacophony, and in places like Perm 36, where it's a Gulag camp that was once a dissident camp, then it was a camp for the police men who have committed crimes, because you had to be separated from regular inmates. It was rebuilt as a Gulag camp, it's very eerie, and then the founders were removed and other regime installed, and just this, how people feel about Stalin, how people look at that period of time and 20th century in Russia today, just the sculpture garden in Moscow and the cacophony of, it's not cataloged, it's not explained, it's just put there, and it's not, they just sit there, all these sorts of statues, and people have a hard time, really making sense of what is it that they're looking for, how they should be reading all of it. The memorial, the statue in Magadan by Ernst Neizvestny. His initial plan was to have these masks of sorrow throughout Russia. That didn't happen. Right. That's the only one, and locals have a hard time with this memorial because they see Gulag as almost ancient history, and they don't want that mask of sorrow to be a symbol of their lives.
Them, right?
And they kind of get more than mildly annoyed by it.
That's interesting. So maybe if we are out of time, we can continue this conversation.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.